So I want to ask all of you a genuine question. How many times a day are you truly living in the end? How many times are you imagining something lovely and something desirable? Because sadly, for most, we're just policing our thoughts and fighting with our own mind. And this is never going to get us anywhere closer to having that 3D outcome. So last week I had a couple people ask me if I could make another video talking about living in the end and what exactly this means and how we go about doing this, how we should go about living in the end to manifest our desire. And this got me thinking for a moment about what this means and how to make a video to really get this message across. Because something that I realized is that for most people watching this video, most people who know and understand the law of assumption have already heard these terms before. We've already heard terms such as circumstances don't matter, ignore your 3D, we just need to live in the end, but we're failing to grasp what this is and what this means. And so today I want to talk about living in the end, but more specifically, I want to talk about the ways that we keep ourselves from living in the end, because this can be a very sneaky and subtle thing that we do that sabotages everything. And what exactly do I mean by that? Well, to better understand, we need to have an understanding about living in the end. And I have made a video before talking about living in the end and what this means. So if you perhaps are not familiar with this term and what it is, you can check out the video that I made all about it. I'll link that guy up here and down below. But the point that I made in that other video was that we're always living in the end in some form or another. This is something that we're always doing anyways. It's just for most, typically, we're living in an end that we do not desire. We're living in an end of something that we don't want. Instead of imagining things that are lovely, we imagine things that are undesirable. We imagine things that we fear and make us feel anxious. And that is the bigger message of today's video. We need to stop limiting ourselves. We need to stop conditioning ourselves in imagination. Because the truth is, we are always living in the end. Living in the end just means that we are imagining something that has not happened yet in the 3D. And this is something that we do every day anyways. We're always thinking from a place of an outcome that is going to happen or what we anticipate is going to happen. I felt inspired to make a video relaying a different message, a stronger message, and that is to stop acting and playing so small. This is one of the biggest traps that we fall into when it comes to conscious manifestation, and we must stop doing this. Conditioning our desires is one of the worst habits that we fall into, and one of the reasons why we fail to see our manifestation come to pass. And by conditioning our desire, that just means that we are placing terms and conditions on what we will allow ourselves to imagine. We will not let ourselves even go there in imagination because of the 3D circumstances or because the beliefs and assumptions that we hold. So an example of conditioning would be to say, I can't manifest my SP until my self-concept is perfect, or I can't imagine going to the end until I have X amount of money. I can't imagine a new house or a new car because I don't have any money in my bank account. I can only be happy when I have a new car or a new house. I can only have this happiness when I experience XYZ in the 3D. Or we say something like, if only I had more money, then I would be fulfilled, then I would be satisfied. And this is something that we're constantly doing. This is one of the worst habits that we have in general, because what this does is it creates this boundary, it creates this restriction, this self-imposed restriction on what we are able to imagine. And the reason that we limit ourselves and condition our desires like this is because we're scared. It's because we're fearful. For many people, playing small means playing safe. It means we won't have to fear failure or disappointment because we never aimed high in the first place. And this is one of the biggest fallacies that we hold on to. I have lost count of how many people I've talked to that have told me that they cannot imagine what it's like to be with their SP. They cannot imagine what it is like to have wealth and abundance, to have the thing that they desire. They cannot even imagine it. And I was certainly like this myself. I found when I was younger that trying to go somewhere in imagination that I desired to be felt so foreign to me. It felt so far away from me. It's like I had this barrier created, keeping myself from even going there in my mind. I would continue to take the limitations, my perceived limitations of the 3D with me in imagination. Because things were not a certain way in the 3D, I wasn't able to even imagine a better scenario. In fact, I kept imagining worse and worse scenarios, and thus, naturally, the 3D would reflect that. So if there's one thing that I hope all of you can take away from today's video, it is to stop playing so small. Let yourself imagine something fully and deeply, because that is living in the end. Living in the end is when we are thinking from the place of already being the person that we want to be. It's not imagining to get a certain outcome in the 3D, it's placing ourselves there right now. Going to that space, that mental space in our mind where we already have the desire that we want. Do not continue to hold back in imagination and condition your desires. If we continue to allow that fear of failure or that fear of disappointment take the lead, then it's going to feel like we are locked out of our own imagination. And that is how we keep ourselves prisoner to the 3D. This was one of the big mistakes that I made. I continued to wait until things appeared a certain way in the 3D before I would change my own thinking. And that's not how this works. I would wait for things to change before I'd change. So I would continue to think about the things that I wanted longingly. I would continue to think of them. I would continue to see myself separate from what I desired. So I was living in the end of things that I didn't want. And this is what we have to remember. This is what I want everybody to walk away from this video knowing, is that we do not have to wait until something changes in the 3D in order to imagine it. We do not have to restrict ourselves from imagining something lovely because of the 3D circumstances. That's what this means. We're not imagining to get an outcome. We're not imagining to hope and pray that things come out a certain way in the 3D. No, we're going there in our mind, and we're going there right now. Do not wait until tomorrow to imagine. Do not wait until so-and-so calls me or until somebody does this or that. Go there right now. One of the things that we have to remember above everything else is that there's no limitations to the imagination. That is why when people tell me that they can't imagine something, I push back on them. I tell them how flat out that is not true. We are in the habit of restricting ourselves in imagination, but this is a habit that must be broken. If we continue to think about our desire from the place of not having it and wanting it and longing for it, that desire is going to continuously be out of reach for us. If we keep it up on that pedestal, it's just going to be out of reach. So we must stop playing so small. We have got to stop placing limits on what we are able to imagine, because you, as awareness, as your own wonderful human imagination, is limitless. You are not bound to the limitations of the 3D in your mind. You are not bound to whatever the circumstances look like in your mind. You can, in this very moment, construct a scene, construct a space in your imagination where you are already the person you desire to be. And that is the entire point of this. But out of fear, we continue to aim small. We continue to keep ourselves this tall because of the fear of failure or disappointment. We have to be bold here. We have to feel boldly and deeply as the person we desire to be. Because if we continue to wait until the outside circumstances are perfect, we're going to be waiting a very long time. Hey, what's up, you guys? Missy from the future here. And I wanted to share with you a passage and something that really helped me to remember not to limit myself or condition my desires. And it's actually a passage from the Bible, Matthew 18, verse 3, where Jesus says, "Truly I tell you that unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." And what I took this to mean is that we need to stop being so critical and restrictive of ourselves and imagination. We need to stop limiting ourselves in imagination. If we want to truly experience the kingdom of heaven or our fulfilled desire, we must imagine boldly. The ability to free ourselves in our mind and not take the limitations and restrictions of the 3D with us into imagination is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing we can learn in all of this. We've lost our childlike ability to imagine things fully and completely for the pure sake of enjoyment, for the pure sake of feeling good about it, because we can, and we don't need a reason to do so. And this passage would always help me to remember that. It would help me to become unstuck anytime that I was fighting with myself in my mind, or any time that I was conditioning my desires in imagination. Remember always that the kingdom of heaven is within you. There are no limitations to what we can imagine and what we can experience at any moment. We do not need to worry about time. We do not need to worry about circumstance. We do not need to worry about what could, would, or might happen. We can construct it. We can create it right now in our mind. And until we learn to do so, until we change and become like children who have the innate natural ability to imagine anything that they want for the pure sake of enjoyment, until we learn to do this, we will not enter the kingdom of heaven. So remember to do so always. And anytime you catch yourself forgetting, come back to that passage. So I hope this was helpful for you guys, and I hope it made it a little bit easier to come around and get unstuck. Bye, guys. We can imagine anything. We are quite capable of imagining the loveliest of outcomes for ourselves. We are quite able to put ourselves in that place where we already have what we desire. We can construct this world. We can go create this space in our imagination right now. And the only thing stopping us from doing so is our own fears and our own limitations, our own perceived limitations at that. So I want to ask all of you a genuine question. How many times a day are you truly living in the end? How many times are you thinking from the fulfillment of the desire versus thinking about it, thinking of the separation of it? How many times are you imagining something lovely and something desirable? Because sadly, for most, we're just policing our thoughts and fighting with our own mind. And this is never going to get us anywhere closer to having that 3D outcome. So going forward, we must stop conditioning ourselves. We must stop limiting ourselves, and we must stop acting so small. All of creation is finished, and it exists within you in your own wonderful human imagination. And any time you think about your desire throughout the day-to-day, I want you to take a moment, in that moment, to stop and allow yourself to feel deeply into what it would be like if you were now experiencing that in real time. What would it be like if you were now living in that state where you and SP are happily married or happily together? What if right now you had your successful business and you were celebrating with your friends and your family? What if right now you were traveling the world and experiencing everything that you've always wanted? Give that to yourself whenever the desire comes to you. So as soon as a new want or desire comes in, I want you to immediately imagine that it is fulfilled and immediately give yourself the feeling of satisfaction, the feeling of completion, and the feeling of relief, because it is now done. We must stop restricting these places in our mind. We must stop telling ourselves that these things are impossible based on the 3D circumstances. Living in the end is suspending all of that disbelief. It is defying your senses. It is defying what the 3D may look like in this moment right now, and boldly assuming that it is complete and you are fulfilled regardless. So if we want to get out of the stagnation of the 3D circumstances, we have to remember to take a different approach. If we do not change from within, nothing will change from without. We must remember that we're not occupying a state to get something. We're not doing a technique with the aim of changing the outcome. We're not doing this to get something different. We're imagining to have the experience of it. We are giving ourselves that experience in our mind, in imagination. And we must remember to do so. Because to do anything else is to miss the mark. To think and feel longingly about your desire, to keep it up on that pedestal, and to keep mulling into that old story is to sin or miss the mark. And we will not see the 3D change if we do not start to imagine boldly, if we are not boldly assuming that we are now, in our imagination, living the life that we desire to live. To do anything other than that is restricting ourselves from that experience and from seeing that desire come to pass. And once we do this, once we understand that this is an inner change, that we are going within, and once we learn to stop limiting ourselves and to stop playing so small, once we understand that we can go anywhere in imagination, that we have the power to be whoever we want, see whatever we want, and experience whatever we want, and to give ourselves that now, once we know this and once we apply this, that is how you manifest any freaking thing that you want. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope you found it helpful. I hope this message got heard loud and clear. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you are interested in any of my other resources, I will have links down below to my coaching programs, my workshops and courses, my blog, my podcast, my social links. Got a ton of resources down in that description box, so definitely be sure to check it out. Also, be sure to check out the other videos on this channel. Be sure to check out my Manifestation Fundamentals playlist. Each video is a different topic, but it all talks about how to manifest the best life ever. So until we meet again, you guys, as always, please take care, be well, and never forget to imagine boldly. To do so will set you free. Happy manifesting, guys.